take a minute if you need to and prepare a new quad chart. At the top of your quad chart, label this Unit World War One, and the lesson is the outbreak of war. And the essential question is, what factors contributed to the inevitability and the outbreak of World War One? You can pause the video if you need to and prep that quad chart. What we're going to dive in today is really the setup for the fracture of the states in Europe during World War One. And I know you've had some introduction to this during world history, and I'll probably differ a little bit than what other history teachers have told you. But essentially, most of the nations in Europe were held together loosely by an alliance system, alliances between different countries for various reasons. And this is the graphic that I like to use to explain it. So on one side, the triple alliances of Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Italy starts initially with an alliance between Germany and Italy in 1882 and Austria, Hungary, and Italy in 1882, and doesn't really unite Germany and Austria, Hungary until later. What this alliance means is that for just about any reason, one of those countries will come to the aid of the other country should hostilities outbreak. The same thing happens later between Britain, France, and Russia, and this is an alliance known as the Triple Entente. But you see the group of people here in the center in purple are ethnically different than the people that they're really attached to in Austria-Hungary. And they claimed an area in Serbia as really their territory, and they ruled over the Serbs. And the Serbs were ethnically Slavic, just like the Russians are ethnically Slavic. So they formed an alliance with Serbia that kind of draws Russia into hostilities when this whole thing outbreaks between Austria-Hungary and Serbia. And you can see those alliances between France and Great Britain tying into Russia really are what draw the other two countries into what becomes the Great War or World War One. And it's really called during this time frame as the powder keg of Europe. One spark could cause that powder keg to blow up. Another thing, Germany really was in a arms race with Great Britain, who had the biggest navy in the world at the time. And they needed that navy to secure the English Channel, where they got most of their supplies. About 90% of the supplies came across the English Channel from Europe into Great Britain. So Germany wanted to interdict some of that, and they wanted to kind of assert themselves with a larger navy, which really never came to be or came to be a big issue in either World War One or World War Two later. Something else that's interesting about this is for hundreds of years, families had married children off to other families as part of treaties in Europe. And what this left at this time frame was a series of monarchs in all of these countries who were related. Essentially, they were all cousins. And some of these cousins didn't like each other very much. And there was a lot of competition for territory, for land, and for resources, specifically in Africa. You can look at this map. You can see the national interest of where various European countries had inside of Africa to bring resources that were critical to their countries back into Europe. And there was a lot of competition for these as well. Here's where I'll differ from what a lot of your other teachers will have said. I think that a lot of historians and a lot of history teachers say that nationalism was a major reason that caused World War II. Essentially, that the Germans were proud to be Germans, the British were proud to be British, the French were proud to be French, and they're all going to fight each other over that. That's not a significant factor, or nationalism in that sense isn't a significant factor in the outbreak of World War One. But nationalism in the sense that people joined the military at the time fighting for local regiments. So in Great Britain, entire groups of young men from the same cities who'd met at the local pub would join to go fight over in France in World War One. And they did that on a level that was really pretty great. They didn't go fight for the king. They didn't go fight for the larger part of the country or any national interest, but they did go fight for their friends that they'd met at the pub. The Serbs are the exception to this, right? The Serbs were ethnically Slavic, and as ethnic Slavs, they wanted to be more aligned with Russia, and they wanted to get out from underneath the monarch oppression that they felt from Austria-Hungary. This brings us to the first shot, January 28th, 1914. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, who I think we all know is the main catalyst we attribute to the breakout of World War I. He was visiting the capital city of Sarajevo in Bosnia. He had big plans for the day to make a visit and a speech. And there was a group of people from a terrorist organization in Serbia called the Black Hand who were sent in there, or who maybe not sent by the government. Certainly, the government never acknowledged that, but they went into Bosnia to do this assassination attempt against the Archduke, the heir to the throne in Austria-Hungary. Now, something interesting about him is he was a moderate. He really felt like giving more autonomy and power back to the people in Bosnia, and probably the people there would have been a lot better off with him in charge rather than the current leader at the time. But I think the Black Hand, as a terrorist organization, didn't really care. They didn't know that. They wanted to secede and make an independent Serbian state. Gavrilo Princip is the man credited with actually killing the Archduke. You can see he's not very big man, but he's the one who actually got to do it. And he didn't get on his first attempt. He got scared and he left. But there were 6 people initially sent in to do this assassination, and they were all given a little piece of or a pill of some type of poison that they were supposed to take if they were about to get captured. And the first person who made an attempt at this tried to take that pill, and it was not very effective. So it made him sick, but it didn't kill him, and he was captured and beaten by a crowd and ended up put in prison. This map kind of shows the day's events. So early on that morning, he arrives here on number 1, and they go in a motorcade downtown. They're going to town hall, and at about a little after 10 o'clock in the morning, the first attempt on his life is made. Now, what they had done is they had spread out along this route. And again, Princip got scared, and he kind of went away after this attempt. They could have had another attempt on his life further through here. But this individual threw a bomb at Franz Ferdinand's car. It bounced off of the car, and it detonated under the car behind him. And the Archduke at that time said, no, this is okay. He'd been warned about an attempt on his life. He really wasn't worried about it. It wasn't successful. So let's go on down to Sarajevo Town Hall. So he goes all the way down to the town hall. He conducts his meeting, and then he decides, some people were hurt in that bomb attack. Let's go to the hospital and let's visit them before we depart town. So that's where they go. They're going to the hospital, and on the way, the Archduke's driver takes a wrong turn, and this is kind of it's kind of fate, and it's kind of lucky, because Gavrilo Princip had went to a cafe, and he was having a sandwich. Some people say he was having a coffee. Likely he was having both, but he was on one of these cafe bars that had tables outside on the street in Bosnia, and the Archduke's car stops right in front of it. They realized that they made a wrong turn, and cars at this time, early 1900s, didn't have a reverse gear on them. So they had to get out and push the car and kind of turn it to turn it around on the street to make it turn around and go the other way. And Gavrilo Princip happened to be sitting right there, and you can see he went right up to the side of the car, and he shot both the Archduke and his mistress. It doesn't end right there. So that's June 28th, and war isn't declared until almost a month later. What happens in the meantime is Austria-Hungary thinks Serbia is responsible. So they go to Serbia and they say, hey, we want you to conduct an investigation into what happened. Find these terrorists and bring these terrorists to justice and send them to us so that we can prosecute them. Serbia does this. They run an investigation inside, and essentially they come out and say, it wasn't our fault. We didn't do anything about it. Black Hand doesn't work for us. Well, that wasn't sufficient for Austria-Hungary. So they go to Germany, who was the big military power inside Europe at the time. Austria-Hungary was not a big military power, and they asked them for support based on their alliance. And then about a month later, Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia. Russia, remember Russia in that first slide is aligned closely with Serbia. They mobilize their army onto the border in response to that. And then a couple of days later, Germany declares war on Russia and in France. And this is how the layout of World War I initially takes hold. And you can see that it doesn't look very good for the Triple Alliance in the center, right? They have armies on both sides of them, but that's not exactly how the war plays out. And it's a new kind of war, yeah. So ever since early wars, such as the Napoleonic Wars, people would go and fight kind of as sport. It was an adventure. Um, the chances of dying in one of these conflicts wasn't very, very high. In fact, most Europeans, especially the British, thought that the war would be over. They'd be home by Christmas in about 5 months. We know now that it set the stage for really 4 years of terrible, terrible warfare. I'll give you a couple minutes to just read over these and think about for yourself as you're reviewing them. Was World War One a just war based on the just war doctrine? Was it declared by a proper legal authority? Was it taken to right something that was unjust? Was the damage caused, in hindsight, easy to say, was the damage caused proportional to what they hoped to achieve? Did either side have a reasonable probability of success based on the alliance system? And did we make all reasonable efforts to spare the lives of innocent civilians?